Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, the global citizens. We want to take this opportunity to welcome you to this wonderful evening session here in the Central European region. And with us today, we have a minister from Scottish, that is Mr. Richard Lochhead, who is the Minister for Justice or Just Transition, Employment and Fair Work in the Scottish Government. I tend to think that this is a wonderful title, but it also comes with many responsibilities, particularly in these days. Mr. Lochhead joins us today as a government representative, a government that is committed to pay many of the objectives that have been outlined by previous speakers in this global summit. For example, Mr. Lochhead's government is one of the governments that has best interest of citizens, where it has reduced youth unemployment 4 years ahead of target. That is a very wonderful achievement. We met our target to reduce youth unemployment in Scotland by 40% by 2020, 4 years ago in 2017. So this is something, a report that you can find in the Scottish Government website. The Scottish Government also cares for all. We have extended free personal and nursing care, everyone who needs it, regardless of age. And we are now taking steps towards transforming National Care Service. That is another example. The other example is that the gender balance cabinet, generally, this is the first gender balanced cabinet in the UK. We introduced the first gender balanced cabinet in UK, one of only a handful of gender parity cabinets around the world. Also, could give another example that Lochhead's government is one of the leading climate justice fund, or the world leading climate justice fund. The Scottish Government has been praised around the world for actions on climate justice, providing £24 million to support projects in Malawi, Zambia, and Rwanda, and £2 million for loss and damage, and the list goes on and on. Our keynote speaker today shows that it is possible when government listens to people and works with them. And that is the government that we wish to have in all governments. Without further ado, I think it is my honor to welcome Mr. Mr. Richard Lochhead to take this floor and share with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction and for referring to Scotland. And I'm speaking to you from Scotland, from Bonnie, Scotland today. And thank you to everyone, no doubt, around the world for dialing into this session today. And I want to thank the Global People Summit for inviting me to say a few words today. And it's great to know there's such a diverse range of groups and organisations who are coming together to build a greener and a fairer world. As Minister for Just Transition, Employment and Fair Work in the Scottish Government, my responsibilities focus on delivering net zero in a way that is fair and just for all, tackling climate change and other linked objectives, such as the creation of good green jobs. For Scotland, just transition means meeting our social, economic and climate goals. It means harnessing the transition across all sectors of the economy to build a better and more equal Scotland. Now, Scotland has scars from previous rapid transitions, particularly in our former coal mining communities back in the 1980s. These former mining communities have been impacted for generations, financially, culturally, and socially. We also in Scotland at the moment have a very significant oil and gas sector supporting many jobs directly and indirectly. Now, a bright future lies ahead for our revitalised North Sea that supports our net zero energy system. However, planning for the future will be crucial if we are to avoid the mistakes of the past. So with good planning, we can capture economic and social opportunities and make sure the risks associated with rapid structural change are mitigated as much as possible. Our communities, our workers and businesses must be able to benefit from the transition as we go towards our net zero targets. Similarly, we must identify communities, groups of workers, or particular areas of our country that may be impacted, and we have to work with them on solutions. That's why we are developing just transition plans for sectors and regions across Scotland. And this work builds on our world first national just transition planning framework. So that framework has engagement and co-design at its heart. So we want to ensure that those who stand to be most impacted by the transition to net zero are given a voice in determining their own futures. The energy strategy and the just transition plan that goes with that will be our first. So the first just transition plan will be for energy alongside a refreshed energy strategy that will be consulted upon and published throughout this year. And it will set out a roadmap for delivering on our energy ambitions for 2030. It will also lay out our vision for Scotland's future net zero energy system. The cost of energy, big topical issue just now, and where we get it from, and the impact it has on the climate are all interdependent. The steps we will take to achieve energy security and lower costs of energy should also help us tackle the global climate emergency. So this summer, we're undertaking a wide range of engagement activities to inform the development of the energy strategy and the just transition plan that goes with that. We are setting out to hear from as wide a range of voices as possible from all corners of Scotland. And we will be reaching out beyond established energy or climate stakeholders. For example, we are running a participatory event for the community in a rural area and connecting with young people to hear their views as well. In addition to our work on plans, we're investing £500 million in a Just Transition Fund for the northeast of Scotland over the next 10 years. That's to help the transition for an area particularly connected to the oil and gas industry. The fund will support a range of projects aimed at accelerating the transition to a fairer and greener economy. It will include some large-scale transformational projects, as well as those that promote community-level action at the community level, appropriate to local needs and circumstances. So we have specifically ring-fenced £1 million in this financial year, for example, to be allocated through a process of participatory budgeting, allowing local communities to influence and have a direct say on how money is spent in their local areas. Now, to guide us on this transition, we have appointed for the second time a Just Transition Commission to advise and scrutinise our approach. And this body of experts will continue to engage with those most likely to be impacted by the transition and with other sources of expertise, both at home here in Scotland, but also internationally as well. And the internationally renowned climate academic and co-chair of the UN IPCC, Professor Jim Skia, has been reappointed our chair for the new Just Transition Commission. Collectively, the membership has expertise in areas including finance, equality, infrastructure, innovation, and community empowerment. They will play a vital role in advising and scrutinising our first Just Transition Plan for the energy sector, ensuring that the economic and social impacts are managed in a way that is fair for everyone. Our commitment to socially just climate action doesn't stop at our own borders. Scotland was very honoured in November last year to host the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, in Glasgow. And I was there for many, many days, participating in many events, and I was struck by the level of international interest in our approach here in Scotland to just transition. So we are determined to generate a COP26 legacy and build momentum behind the just transition internationally, learning from others while sharing Scotland's experience to date. That's why we have allocated £100,000 to the Under 2 Coalition Secretariat to establish the Just Transition Task Force, to facilitate knowledge sharing between members of the coalition which brings together over 270 governments, representing 1.75 billion people and 50% of the global economy. The task force aims to advance an international approach to just transition that has the principles of climate justice at its core. The first activity of the task force is a series of working groups with under 2 coalition members to share Scotland's just transition experience so far and discuss common challenges in areas of international collaboration. So we will be convening the task force for its first meeting in early July. Securing a just transition is therefore not an issue for individual governments or states. Rather, it's an international effort that requires global cooperation. Climate change is impacting communities all over the world. Indeed, some climate impacts are now unavoidable and may go beyond what we will be able to adapt to. And as is so often the case, those who do the least to contribute to climate change are those perhaps most affected by its disastrous impacts. This leads to a huge degree of financial damage and incalculable non-economic costs, which are already being suffered by communities around the world. And that's why Scotland did pledge, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, £2 million for loss and damage at COP26. It was disappointing, of course, that more progress was not made on delivering the £100 billion commitment to climate finance at COP26. This was an issue of trust and would have demonstrated global solidarity with those facing the worst impacts of climate change. Current projections show that we are not on track to achieve the goal of $100 million a year in global finance until 2023. So hopefully by COP27, it is vital that developed countries deliver and go beyond the £100 million annual commitment if we are to achieve climate justice. And in order to move from dialogue to action, we aim to capture lessons learnt from delivering against loss and damage for real-world application to provide a template that can be used to scale. Learning from lived experience must be central to emergent action, not just as narrative, but as a fundamental part of the global evidence base, if we are to move from pledges and promises to an actual impactful programme of work. We will continue the momentum in loss and damage by playing a convening and leadership role over 2022, with the aim of arriving at COP27 with a programme of work, an expanded set of funders, concrete proposals for harnessing philanthropic and research funding, and also a pathway for aligning the UNFCCC agreed process with broader momentum. And we will build meaningful and lasting international partnerships to mobilise action and ambition and find solutions to address some of the key climate change issues, including through our position as co-chair of the Under 2 Coalition. We are committed to being a bridge builder to amplify the voices of the Global South and address inequality of climate change and marginalised people, especially young people and women. However, urgent work must be taken forward in adaptation and mitigation. Funds to address the loss and damage caused by climate change must sit separate from an additional 2 existing climate change finance, currently international supporting adaptation and also mitigation activities. So the Scottish Government has made significant progress in our own initiatives to address climate injustice. We have recently committed to treble world first climate change fund that we have here in Scotland to £36 million over this parliamentary term. Well, these financial commitments are small in the grand scale of the issue. They are an important step towards addressing climate justice globally and acknowledging Scotland's historic responsibility. The Climate Justice Fund will continue to focus on communities most affected by climate change, ensuring the views and needs of those typically marginalised in such communities are at the centre of future climate justice interventions in Malawi, Rwanda and Zambia. So I hope that gives you a flavour of the role that Scotland's playing in some of our own ambitious policies in terms of addressing the big challenges the planet faces when it comes to the climate and the climate emergency and delivering climate justice. So I want to just thank everyone for tuning in today. Delivering a just transition is vital to all of us, not just for Scottish workers and communities, but also on an international level as we work together to reduce emissions and collectively seek climate justice. Scotland's definition of a just transition is very broad and intentionally so. It goes beyond individual sectors and regions to ensure we build a stronger and fairer economy and deliver on Scotland's net zero ambitions. So we're making a contribution to the rest of the world as well. So thank you for listening today.
Thank you so much. That is a very wonderful sharing, and we can see for sure the commitment of the Scottish Government to ensure justice and development in sustainable development to the rest of the world. We have a question that has been posed, and the attendee first says, "Congratulations! It is wonderful to see such progress." He would wish to know, how does the government evaluate if the money is that is set aside to empower the community is spent in accordance with the community's aspiration?
Thank you for that question. And it's a good question, but clearly the whole purpose of participatory budgeting is to empower local communities and give them a direct say over how some budget is spent. It's an early phase in Scotland, but we have tried it before. And as part of the funding we have available for the northeast of Scotland, there's a lot of jobs in the oil and gas industry. We are going to go directly to communities. And we're going to work through what's effectively a climate change community hub. So we have lots of different community groups at the moment that work together. And we will work in partnership with them because they're plugged into local communities. They are local community representatives, and we'll work closely with them as we deliver this participatory budgeting. So they will guide it going forward. This is all part of the way in which we're approaching just transition in Scotland, is to empower local communities, let them decide their own pathway to net zero. Clearly, we'll have national projects as well as local projects, but this gives a very strong local dimension to how we're delivering some of the funding in the projects. So clearly, the local climate change hubs and the people working with those hubs at local community level will guide the funding and make sure it's used for what we want it to be used for and what local communities want it to be used for.
Thank you for that response. And for sure, we advocate for community participatory approaches and involvement for purposes of sustainability. And generally, when a community owns a project, they are able to run with it effectively. To follow up on the same question or in the same line, there's another question that the Scottish Government is trying to clarify their right to self-determination. How does the government engage with people in working through this major issue?
So that's a very topical issue in Scotland at the moment. And we just announced this week, the First Minister announced on Tuesday that we want to see an independence referendum taking place on October the 19th next year, 2023. And there will be a lot of campaigning and work between now and then. And of course, our preference is to work with the UK government, and we're asking the UK government to work with us to deliver a referendum by consensus between the two governments. And if not, we'll have to clearly pursue the other options the First Minister laid out in the Scottish Parliament this week. So we will work closely. In 2014, one of the strengths of the previous independence referendum was it's very much a grassroots campaign, and it worked from bottom up with many local community groups running things locally, and it was not centralised in that regard. So I expect that will be repeated to a significant degree in the run-up to 2023's referendum as well. But in Scotland, we've also piloted climate assemblies in the past, and I know other countries have taken them forward as well. So in some of the big issues of the day, we have used them before to have a representative sample of the population and listen to them, some of the big issues of the day. But clearly there'll be a Scottish Government campaign and a lot of effort in regards to the referendum, but importantly there'll be other campaigns and activities happening at community level, and they'll be fostered by the Scottish Government and supported by the Scottish Government, because we want to see it as a grassroots campaign going forward.
Thank you so much, Richard. And it's very interesting. The rest of the world will be watching to see how this goes on, even as we take part in different levels to ensure that we achieve climate justice. Well, there's another question that has come in, and in other countries that are working with their communities, for example, that is New Zealand, is the Scottish government considering creating a people's budget, a budget where all communities are full consulted on how spending should take place.
So that relates to the previous answers I was given in terms of we are allocating a significant amount of the funds that we are making available at the moment to participatory budgeting. And our anticipation is we will build upon that going forward in the coming years. So we want communities to have a big say in shaping their own destinies, their own future, just as we want Scotland, and you mentioned the referendum earlier on, to have a say over their own future and for decisions to be taken closer to home and not have our pace of change in relation to climate justice or renewable energy being dictated by others. We want to harness Scotland's talents and abilities to accelerate the energy transition and getting to net zero. And that philosophy applies to local communities as well. So that's why we are piloting the participatory budgeting, so that communities can decide their own future. And that's at the heart of the Just Transition. The Just Transition is about co-designing with communities or sectors of the economy how we manage the Just Transition going forward as we go through the transformation of the economy towards net zero.
Thank you. That's very interesting. And I would like to pose another question that has been brought. I don't know how I can paraphrase it, but I'll try my best. I think it links to the first question that you had already responded, but now this one has a wider perspective, sort of. And the participant asks, how is the government or the Scottish government considering that you are also Minister of Justice? So how are you going to ensure, or how are you focusing on ensuring that justice is achieved while working to advance a green economy or green energy globally? Because some of the materials has been, as it has been mentioned somewhere through media and some areas, that some of the materials, particularly that are used for the solar energy, they're acquired in a manner that is sort of abusive. So, and at the end of the day, we have companies that are focusing more on economic achievement and not on the humane way of or well-being of the community. So how is the Scottish government ensuring that even as it advances a green economy or a green energy, generally where the all involvement or all parties involved, there's justice throughout the system?
Thank you. That's a big question. And firstly, the Just Transition and the fact we want this to be just going forward is about creating good jobs for people so that they don't fear for their livelihoods, because if their jobs are changing because of the greening of the economy, or their sectors are changing, perhaps you're working in oil and gas and you're just starting out in your career and you're wondering what the next 30 years holds for you. We want to manage that going forward so people remain in good quality jobs as part of the green economy. But it's also about using the opportunity of when we're transforming the economy to tackle inequalities and fix mistakes that have been made in the past. So we know that, we have an unequal society, and the UK is a very unequal country, and Scotland suffers from that as well. So as we look at generating prosperity with the green economy going forward, we want everyone to benefit from that and not to close that gap as much as we can in terms of tackling inequality. So that means we have to have good green jobs for people. It means everyone should see the benefits of what we're doing. So if we are producing many more times the renewable energy we need as a country, and that's an asset and that's an opportunity. We want to make sure that people benefit from that. And in Scotland, we have high rates of fuel poverty, which is a sign that the current energy policy from the UK government's failed us. So going forward, as we redesign the economy, we want to make sure we tackle issues like fuel poverty, because we're an energy-rich country. So our energy should benefit the many and not the few, and the riches and the economic benefits from that should benefit the many, not the few as well. So that's a big challenge, but that's why we're planning things as we go forward over the next few years. And in terms of individual companies, it's interesting. I launched something this week called it was a report on what's called the business purpose, which is about building a well-being economy in Scotland and asking businesses to play their role and to look at their purpose, not just to make profit, but to make profit in a way in which they're benefiting the environment, they're benefiting the workers' conditions and other ways. So we're asking each company, this is in conjunction with the business community we worked on this report, to promote all businesses having a purpose. So thinking about what their own purpose is as a business and how they're contributing to improving the quality of life for people, the quality of their environment, taking into account issues in so many different other ways in terms of having a diverse workforce, and so on and so forth. So I think the business purpose has got a big role to play in the journey towards net zero, because we want companies to prosper, to profit, but to do that in a way that's sustainable and benefits Scotland's environment in our journey towards net zero, not hamper it.
Thank you so much. Well, it will be good to see how justice is maintained all through the process, as that is key. And we always say that to achieve a new eco-social world where everybody is treated equally and everyone is living in a world that is just, it will enable us to achieve proper well-being, or we will all be able to live a happy life, if I should say so. Now, this last question, not unless there will be another one that will come. There's another question that has come here. There are across the world different, more powerful national interests than Scotland, where international affairs are still reserved to a UK government. What are 3 ways that global civil society, like people in this summit, can work with you for change?
Yes, because it's very important to say that from a Scottish perspective, we want to be a global international player and help achieve global justice. And you mentioned, and I mentioned in my remarks, the loss and damage funding, the climate justice fund that the Scottish Government is putting forward to help other countries around the world, because this is an issue about global justice, not just in terms of my previous answer, local issues in Scotland and working with Scottish companies. It's about delivering global justice, particularly to the global south, as we deal with climate change going forward. COP26 had a big dimension to it in terms of global society, and people are across the world working together through the Under 2 coalition, which I mentioned. Also, we're working with other governments to promote these agendas. We want to be part of all those networks that exist. I was fascinated to meet delegations representing many different Indigenous communities from across the world when COP26 was in Glasgow, and speak to them about how we're all working together. And we have to. It's a responsibility of governments, future COPs, to continue to foster that grassroots collaboration across the world and make sure that the global society and people feel involved and have a say and influence over the direction the world is taking towards net zero. So Scotland is very keen to be part of those international collaborations. We're already funding many, getting them off the ground and helping foster them, and we will continue to do that in years ahead.
Thank you so much. to this end, I don't think, because of time, we will not take in further questions. However, we want to take this opportunity to present our sincere appreciation for taking time to share with us and reflect on the role of particularly Scottish government, which could be replicated to other governments on how to promote justice across the world, from local to global. This is why the People's Summit is focusing on incorporating, particularly empowering or facilitating people to take responsibility by themselves, which you've alluded to, that the Scottish government is also utilizing these approaches of people owning power to take, so that they are able to lead in terms of achieving development and growth. We want to present our sincere appreciation and thank you so much. We look forward to working with governments, and we pray that it will be possible for governments to support even the civil society in promoting all these approaches.
Well, thank you very much. And you have Scotland's support, wholehearted support to achieve those objectives. And of course, as Just Transition Minister, the aspirations and objectives you outline are at the heart of the Just Transition. We will not successfully save our planet and save mankind and humankind if we don't take people with us and work together and help ensure people co-design all the policies and steps we're taking towards net zero across the world.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That is a perfect ending from your side. And we look forward to work with you for sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.